buildings all across the state. I stand before you with a group of local attorneys that I'm very proud to be affiliated with, the Criminal Defense Bar. It seems odd to me that so many people condemn the choice to be a criminal defense attorney, and why so many people question why we choose to be criminal defenders. It's fair to say, at least in some circles, we're not the most popular people in the land. Yet, if you ask a crowded room full of people who values the protections of freedom and liberty, almost every hand in the room will go up. That is what criminal defense lawyers do every day. We are part of the guardians of liberty. We carry the torch that our founding fathers believed to be vitally important to a free society, as memorialized in our Constitution in the Sixth Amendment, which states in part, to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. That is what we do every day, is to help protect people's constitutional rights. Why is the Declaration of Independence important? The Declaration of Independence was a revolutionary manifesto that called for the end of British rule over America. The Declaration of Independence is actually the foundation upon which later the Bill of Rights and the United States Constitution were written. The Declaration was but a first step in our fight for freedom. And while the Declaration itself did not secure our liberty or free the slaves, it set us on our path to freedom, and later to the Civil War, and then on to the Civil Rights Movement. Our founding fathers' fight for liberty is not over. It is still our fight, and that battle rages on. Those of us who believe in freedom remember Thomas Jefferson's admonition that the fight for liberty requires eternal vigilance. As criminal defense attorneys, we continue our battle to protect the freedoms and liberties that we all cherish. And with that, we give you the reading of the Declaration of Independence.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal stations to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. For when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation so his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions from within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose of obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriation of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for the establishing judiciary powers.
He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial and punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses,
for abolishing a free system of English laws in neighboring province and establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, dissolution, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of a head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless savages whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in our attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations and would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consequency. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and peace friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states that are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. And now we will honor our founding fathers by reading their names by state.
Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, and George Walton. North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, and John Penn. South Carolina, Edward Rutledge and Thomas Hayward Jr., and Thomas Lynch Jr. and Arthur Middleton. Massachusetts, John Hancock, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, and Elbridge Gerry. Maryland, Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, and Charles Carroll of Carrollton. Virginia, George White, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton. Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and George Ross. Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, and Thomas McKern. New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, and Lewis Morris. New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, and Abraham Clark. New Hampshire, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, and Matthew Thornton. Rhode Island, Stephen Hopkins and William Ellery. And Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, and Oliver Wolcott. We'd like to thank you all for coming out today and listening to us read this Declaration of Independence. We hope you have a happy 4th of July, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.